Hello, day three, even though it's like a whole week's gone by, so I apologise for not being around last week, but we're going to carry on. So we're going to get the last couple done this week on nutrition and menopause, and that light's going to really bug me. I can't do that, that's just weird. So we've done all about gut health, we've done all about liver health. Today I want to talk about plant estrogens. And again, I'm going to talk about why these are important for regardless of where you are in your transition, whether you're perimenopause, that menopause kind of window, or whether you're postmenopause. And then tomorrow I'm going to talk about fasting, and I'm going to talk about the difference, the benefits of fasting, the not so good things about fasting, and how to fast when you're perimenopause and how to fast when you're postmenopause, because they are two very different things. And so I'll talk about that. Bearing in mind, this is just it's the tip of the iceberg that I'm going to talk to you about. So today, and then the day after that, I'll actually talk about, I'll give you a chart. This is what you need to be eating if you're perimenopause, in that menopause window, and postmenopause. And I'm going to talk probably a little bit more about postmenopause next year, because I really feel there's a lot being talked about perimenopause, and it's really important because back in 2017 it wasn't being talked about at all. Now I think postmenopause is the next frontier, where no one talks about that at all. And so perimenopause is the kind of the trendy thing now. But actually what happens when your periods stop and you're in that kind of cocoon time, but also afterwards when you come out the other end, you might still have symptoms, but also you can be a bit lost. So I really want to talk about that as well. And I'm going to focus a little bit more on that next year. So back to day 3, plant estrogen. So what the hell is a plant estrogen? It's also called a phytoestrogen. Phyto means plant. And within a plant, there are specific nutrients. So we call these plant nutrients phytonutrients. And these are nutrients that are not essential to our survival in the way that vitamins and minerals are, but they have additional health benefits that we take advantage of. So some nutrients that you find in plants are anti-inflammatory, some plants are antioxidant, some might be antimicrobial, and they are beneficial for a plant, and we take advantage of those chemicals in a plant that then become beneficial for us. Plants contain a chemical that is not estrogen, but it's called phytoestrogen or plant estrogen because it mimics estrogen, particularly when we have it, and so it can be really, really beneficial for us. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to put the slides. So I had problems with trying to use Zoom and into the group. It's never been a problem before, but it's playing up today, and I just haven't had the time to work out what's going on. So I'm going to put the slides that I would have used in the group, just like I've done with day 1 and day 2. So you will have the slides, so you don't worry about taking notes. All the notes will be there. And if you have questions, you can watch this again and write it down, or you can just put in the comments any questions you have. So I just want you to understand what plant estrogens are. So plant estrogens, phytoestrogens, they're compounds that are like estrogen. They mimic estrogen, but they are not estrogen. More recently, they've been termed, because they're not really plant estrogens, they've been termed selective estrogen receptor modulators. And there's also medications that are called that. And that is because they work by regulating estrogen in the body by how they attach and react to our cells. So on our cells, there are receptors. They attach to these receptors, and then something happens. So these are hormones. Estrogens are hormone. Hormones are basically messengers in the body. So the whole purpose of them is to go to a cell. They go into the cell through a door, receptor. They pass on a message, and then the cell does something. Usually it makes something, produces something. So an estrogen is all about producing. And so what these plant estrogens do is that they can actually reduce excess estrogen that we don't want, whether it's the recycled kind or the kind that we get from our outside environment, from chemicals. Or it can actually increase low estrogen, or it pretends to be estrogen, so our body then thinks that it's got enough estrogen. And it's really interesting. There's some really good studies on how important they can be for a lot of women. Not for everyone, nothing it's a panacea. So on our cell, and you'll see what I've done is on the slide Remember when I talked about the liver and the detoxification that happens in the liver, and how you've got like two rooms and you've got like the blue door and the red door. Well, on cells you have doors, which is what we call receptors, and there are two main estrogen receptors, and there's actually lots and lots of different types of estrogen as well, so I'm going to try and keep this as simple as possible. But you have these receptors, so these receptors are like doors, so it's like having a red door and a yellow door. And they're known as alpha and beta. So if you can imagine, the red door is the alpha, yellow door is the beta. They're on a cell. And if you know how insulin works, insulin is like the key that opens the door that lets glucose in. So estrogen basically goes up to these doors, opens these doors, goes into the cell and says, right, I need you to do this, or I need you to make this. It's a messenger. Now the alpha door, the red door, is all about growth and stimulation. It's kind of like the party estrogen. The yellow door, the beta receptor, is much more calming, and it balances out the alpha, the red door. And so what seems to happen with a lot of plant estrogens is that they have an affinity for the beta receptor, the yellow door, and they open up that door, and so they have a much more calming effect on the body. And they may even lock the red door from the inside to stop the excess estrogen from getting in. So that's how it balances out. If you haven't got enough, it kind of pretends that it is the estrogen, so the messages get through and your symptoms are less, because it's not like you've been bombarded with estrogen. And if you have too much, it basically locks the door, blocks the way. So that excess estrogen, the estrogen that you get from chemicals, perfumes and things like that, it basically stops that from getting in the cell and blocks the way. So plant estrogens are really important, and probably more so now because of all the chemicals and these what we call foreign estrogens that are around us. So there's been some really interesting studies done that shows that plant estrogens, or a diet rich in plant estrogens, may actually help prevent heart disease, certainly may ease menopausal symptoms, prevent breast cancer, and may even improve hormonal acne and PMS symptoms. So it doesn't actually matter where you are in your kind of female transition stage, they can actually be really beneficial. There was a study done in 2014. It was the top type of study done, called a meta-analysis, where they look at all the studies that have been done and they come up with a conclusion. And it was shown that actually plant estrogens can reduce the frequency of hot flushes in menopausal women and perimenopausal women without any side effects. There was another study done in 2016, another big meta-analysis, that also showed that plant estrogens could reduce hot flushes and vaginal dryness, but didn't reduce night sweats. So there's some really good stuff coming out. Now, not all women can take plant estrogens and see benefit, and there's lots of reason for that, and I'll explain some of that in a minute. But as I said, there's no panacea. What works for one doesn't always work for another. And what I would say is that you can have plant estrogens are the thing that we should all have in our diet. If that's still not enough and you're still experiencing the hot flushes and the night sweats and you're just feeling really rubbish, then there's no reason why you can't have hormone therapy on top of a really cold vegetarian type diet. There's absolutely no reason why you can't do that. It's not like it's one or the other. What I've seen happen is that sometimes women are really, you can use herbs, you can you diet, you can change your lifestyle, and then sometimes it just gets to the point where that's just not enough and you need the hormone therapy alongside. Some women do really well with just changing their diet and changing their lifestyle and having herbs. Everyone's different. There's no good, bad, fail. There's no reason why you can't do everything. So this isn't, the phytoestrogens aren't a replacement. They're just something that I would just make sure you have in your diet. It's really easy. It's basically plants. Again, if you're eating plants, you're going to be getting plant estrogen. So the top plant estrogen foods are soy. I'm going to talk specifically about soy in a minute because I know people are a bit scared of soy. Shouldn't be. Flax seeds, brilliant. You can put those on your salads. You can put them in your bread. You can put them in your smoothies and grind them up. Just get them in your diet. Flaxseed oil is great too. Sesame seeds. So basically legumes, any kind of beans, chickpeas, black peas, red beans, all of those legumes will have plant estrogen in them. They all have varying amounts. So again, it's not just about you just have to have soy every day. It's about eating a variety of plants. So hummus would be great. Garlic, if you can tolerate garlic. Fruit, some dried fruit will contain plant estrogens. Whole grains generally will have a little bit of plant estrogen in it. Fennel, alfalfa, there's a lot of plant estrogen in alfalfa. You can get alfalfa sprouts and have those on your salads and in your sandwiches. Pretty much all vegetables will have differing amounts. And as I said, legumes. So you can basically see if you're eating a lot of plants, oh, haven't I talked about that before, 30 plus a week, you will get plant estrogens in your diet really easily. But then you can also make sure that you have specifics. So are you eating enough legumes? Are you eating your flax seeds? Are you having some soy? We know that breast cancer in particular, and a lot of menopausal type symptoms, that's probably changing as the Western diet is becoming more common, but it's very low in Japan. And it has been thought that one of the reasons is that they have a diet that is really high in plant estrogen foods, particularly soy. Now, I'm going to talk about soy, but the one thing I would say about soy is that people tend to be really scared of soy. And we don't need to be. I think the biggest thing about soy is that where you get your soy from, and also whether you have enough iodine. So basically, the soy has something called isoflavones. Isoflavones are really, they've been shown, it's a really rich and strong antioxidant. And we know that inflammation, oxidation, that causes quite a lot of damage and the driver of a lot of disease. So they've been shown to ease menopausal symptoms. There's some really interesting research. It's actually been shown also to be beneficial for men, because of the way it can regulate hormones, particularly estrogen and testosterone in men. It's been shown to reduce heart disease risk, as I said, protects against prostate problems, improves bone health, may reduce cancer risk, may prevent osteoporosis. So there was a really interesting 2020 review done that showed that soy isoflavones actually reduced breast cancer, colorectal cancer and endometrial cancer. There was a 2018 study done that showed that soy might reduce the risk of diabetes type 2, specifically in postmenopausal women. And we know that postmenopause, we're more at risk of heart disease and stroke and diabetes and those what we call cardiometabolic type diseases. We become much more at risk of that, and osteoporosis. And soy has been found to be really beneficial by reducing the risk of those things. So really good for postmenopausal women. It's a complete protein, great amount of calcium, good for bone health and heart health. So I'm personally a big fan of soy. But as I said, the problem is where you get soy from. So I love it when it comes from edamame beans, from tofu, tempeh. I actually can't stand tempeh. I think it tastes like old socks, but it's a really good form of soy. Miso, and I don't have a problem with a little bit of soy milk. Sometimes the problem is all the other crap that's in the soy milk and the lining of the cartons. But with all the other stuff that's out there, I mean, I have almond milk that's got all sorts of shit in it just because I like it, and life's too short. But it's not a health drink. But I think you can get some real benefit from some of the soy milk. Just be careful of all the rubbish that's in it. But it's, you know, you're balancing it out. 80% eating well, and if you like your soy milk and you want a soy latte, enjoy a soy latte. The biggest thing when it comes to soy is the cheeses and the yogurts, and it's a bit like coconut. Soy is in everything, and it's the hydrolyzed soy and all the rest of it. That starts to worry me, because then it's a really processed form of soy, and that's where I think some of the problems are, rather than your natural whole type soy. There was a really interesting, I don't know if it was a study, but it was a bit of an eye-opening event. So it was quite 20 odd years ago. They created baby food, and it was soy baby food. And babies that were put on soy baby food got goiter. And they realised that when they added iodine to the soy baby powder, milk, that the goiter went away. So I've become really interested in the relationship between soy and iodine. And if you look at the diet in Japan and in Asian countries that have diets that are rich in plant estrogen foods, specifically soy, they generally have a lot of iodine rich foods. They eat a lot of seafood. They have, you know, seaweed is part of their diet. So I'm a big believer in that if you're going to have soy, you need to make sure that your iodine intake is really good. Now, iodine tests aren't brilliant. If you have hypothyroidism, you do need to be careful. But I'm also not a fan of iodine supplementation. Unless you know what you're doing, you could take iodine supplementation and actually really damage your thyroid and go from hypo to hyper. So I'm not a fan of iodine supplementation. I'd much rather get it from food. And obviously living in New Zealand, we don't have, usually you would get iodine from a lot of plant foods. If you're growing it in New Zealand soil, you're not necessarily going to get that. But if you eat seafood, you're going to get iodine in your seafood. And if you could use seaweed in your cooking, then you'll get your iodine. I mean, I think there's a pack of ceres seaweed is 150 micrograms. Well, that's the amount you need every day just to kind of maintain and not become deficient. So that's easy to do. You know, you can use a little bit of kelp salt. You can use iodized salt, and a lot of bread will have iodine too. So it's easy to make sure that you have a good amount. So I would say look at your diet. If you can, add seafood to your diet. You can get the seaweed and rip it up and put it in salads. You can put it in soups. You can, any stews and stuff, you can add a little bit of seaweed. So it's actually really not difficult. But it's something to think about. Just if you're going to have, usually if I have soy, I don't have it that often. I might have soy once a week. Ideally, if you start to have PMS symptoms, you could have soy a little bit more in the kind of the weeks leading up to your period. If you had hot flushes, then you might have soy a couple of times a week. But just make sure that you're getting iodine from your diet in the form of seafood or seaweed, just to make sure that you've got a really good balance of the two. So that sushi is a good balance of the two. It's just unfortunately it's got lots and lots of rice in, which is probably not so good for us. So I am a big fan of soy. And I love edamame beans. They're probably one of my favourite things, actually. I could eat those every day. I love them. What I would say that's really interesting with some of the studies. So some of the studies they've done where they said, well, actually it wasn't great. It's not like they've done studies and it's absolutely 100% everyone should be having plant estrogens or soy. But what's important is having a really good healthy gut. Now, what happens is you eat these soy isoflavones and then something happens to them. They're broken down in the gut and they're turned into a substance called equol. And equol is the thing that's a really active plant estrogen. So you have to have a healthy gut. There's some studies are looking at what that looks like and whether there is a specific gut bacteria that is responsible for that, because what I suspect will be that the women that live in Asia and Japan in particular have probably got gut bacteria different from, say, Western women, and that's why they're converting to equol, and that's why they're getting the benefits, and maybe we're not because we don't have the gut bacteria. That's what I'm suspecting. I haven't seen anything about that yet. It might have been done and I might have just missed it, but so I am conscious that we may not get the benefits that Asian women might, but there's not a reason to not have it. But what I would say, it's just a reason to make sure that your gut is as healthy as possible. So again, it's that variety. So my tips are basically just to make sure that you're eating, boring I know as it is, but making sure again you're having those 30 plants a week, because if you're having fruit and veg and grains and you're having soy type products and you're mixing it up and you're having lots of colours and you're having lots of variety and you're having lots of different types of plant estrogen, you're going to get the benefit and you're going to have a healthy gut and you're going to have a happy liver. So it's like, it's a win-win-win. And if you are having soy products, just make sure you have a healthy amount of iodine, rich foods, like I talked about, your seaweed and your seafood. Please keep away from supplements unless you're getting specific advice to do so. Don't go and buy an iodine supplement and start taking it without talking to a naturopath or a nutritionist. But have soy as part of your plant foods. And then consider herbs as well. If you have symptoms, then you can consider teas and infusions of specific herbs, or again, you go and see a naturopath or a herbalist and go and get some herbs, because a lot of the herbs that we use that can help with menopause symptoms or balance out our hormones, whether it's PMS or perimenopause or even symptoms post-menopause, a lot of them are plant estrogen rich herbs. So things like black cohosh, vitex or chasteberry, dong quai, even primrose, licorice to some extent, and red clover, which is one of the most well-known. All of them are kind of have plant estrogens as part of their makeup. So one of the reasons why we use them. They have other constituents too, but that's one of the reasons. So you can have some beautiful herbs that you can have alongside your diet that may help with some of those symptoms too. So I'm hoping that you got some ideas, you're a little bit excited. I know I bang on about 30 plants a week and boring, but I'm hoping that you start to see why. So there's no reason why you can't have a steak. As long as you're having plants alongside it, that's what will be beneficial. Although I would say if you're having hot flushes, steak's probably not the best thing to have, because it will create a lot of heat. Because when we digest food, we create heat. So if you're having lots of hot flushes, what you really need is lots of light foods. Think spring foods, salads, cold foods. That would be better for you than something that creates a lot of heat in order to digest. So hopefully that's been helpful. I'd love to know what your takeaways are. I'd love to know if you've learned something. I'd love to know if you're going to do something as a result of this. And I will be back where I'm going to talk to you about fasting. So I'm going to talk to you about the benefits of fasting, what some of the issues with fasting, what I think the best ways of fasting if you're perimenopause, and the best way to fast when you're menopause. Very different. Not much research on it, so some of this is my opinion, something I want to research, but this is from what I've looked at and read. So I'm really looking forward to sharing about fasting, because this is something I'm quite passionate about. So let me know what you thought, let me know what you've learned. Have a fantastic rest of your Sunday evening. Take care, and I will see you all soon.